Okay, so let's get started. The Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. I thought this cartoon was very suitable to get started today. In the middle we see Xi Jinping with a big smile on his face and opening his arms widely to welcome new members into AIIB, at the same time pointing his finger in the eyes of both the Asian Development Bank and the World Bank. The subtitle of today's presentation, because I thought it sounded rather cool, is Final Nail in the Coffin of the US? Because this is something that lies behind this whole AIIB development. We see that there has been a very quick uptake to become a member of AIIB, and close allies to the United States, like the UK, have decided to join.
But
and maybe
is this what we need?
the final nail in the coffin of the US. The final nail of the coffin means that basically, is this the end of the United States as a hegemon worldwide? Is this the end of the leading position of the United States in the world, the dominance of the United States? Yes, it's a saying. The final nail in the coffin of the US. That means the final nail that closes the coffin and the corpse may be buried. Okay.
Is this which media published on? Business Mirror?
I'm not really 100% sure, actually.
Oh, this cartoon?
It looks like Business Mirror. It says Business Mirror.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Let's look at international financial institutions, and more specifically at development banks. We have, of course, very well known, founded during World War II, the World Bank, and its twin, often referred to as the Bretton Woods twins, the IMF. The World Bank, the main role of the World Bank is to provide loans for developing countries. Besides that, they have a large advisory role, for example, in emancipation, in all kinds of human development programs. Then we have the IMF, that's the International Monetary Fund. Basically this is a financial institution. In their foundation letter, it says that one of the things that drives the IMF is that they strongly believe that the condition for prosperity, for international prosperity, is an orderly monetary system. So they are more of a financial organization, whereas the bank is more of a provider of loans. Then we have the Asian Development Bank, which is dominated by Japan and the United States. And there are a lot of other development banks that we may or may not have heard of. We have a European bank, we have the Islamic Development Bank, the African Development Bank, the Brazilian Development Bank, the Chinese Development Bank, etc., etc., etc. What do these development banks do? Basically what they do is they take money from governments, put them in a fund, and use that fund to get more money out of the private market. Because it's not just a country that provides money, like for example in ODA, where a nation or a conglomerate of nations is providing money to a developing country. Now what these development banks do is to put money in a fund and issue obligations. Obligations can be purchased. So basically they are kind of leveraging the fund that they have to get more money out of the private sector and invest that in projects. And in the case of the AIIB, in infrastructure projects in Asia.
What's IMF mean? Commission for international growth? I don't understand.
So basically the difference between, what's the difference between the IMF and the development bank? Is that development banks is more or less providing of development projects, and the IMF is more of a financial institution.
Yeah, I don't understand this sentence.
So basically, and this is very important to understand, also the role of the IMF, for example, in the Greek crisis, is that the IMF has a very strong focus on monetary system. So they believe that if you have a healthy monetary system, then that will instill confidence in the private sector to actually start investing. If governments do not have a good monetary system, if countries do not have a good monetary system, businesses will be scared away and will not make the investment that are necessary to grow a country. So basically, they look at their task in isolation of the real economy. The monetary economy they have to bring under control. As long as they can do that, there will be enough confidence by the real sector, as it's called, so the real production of goods and services, to prosper. And this is where, for example, Greece and the IMF had a big difference of opinion, and still have a big difference of opinion, because Greece claims, Greece claims that there is not only a monetary economy, there is also a real economy. Yes. So for Greece, the solution to their problem lies in restructuring the real economy, and the monetary economy comes first. But the IMF always looks at the world in monetary terms. Monetary terms alone. So there is a wide range of international monetary development banks, yet the AIIB gets a lot of attention. Let's look at for example, the World Bank. The World Bank has 188 members, so basically almost everybody is represented in the World Bank. Capital is 223 billion US dollars subscribed. This is important because there is a difference between what is subscribed and what is actually committed. And the objective of the World Bank is lends money for development of the poor. It started as a restructuring organization, so it was born at the end of World War II, when it was already clear that a lot of nations needed to restructure. Well, finally, very quickly after World War II, a lot of countries managed to get out. Also in Japan, I believe Toyota had received money from the World Bank to restructure. And if we look at the presidents of the World Bank since its inception, we can see a lot of American flags. Actually, all of the presidents of the World Bank have an American passport. Sir James Wolfenson was the only one who has an Australian name behind, Australian flag behind him, because he was born Australian, but he got an American passport later on in his life.
You mean this is previous he was Australian?
Yes, he was born Australian, but he converted his nationality to American. So basically, we can say that all the presidents of the World Bank have had an American passport, which is an indication of how what a strong dominance the United States has had throughout its history. If we look at the Asian Development Bank, that is the Asian nationality, it has 67 members, so not as many as the World Bank, not by far. It was founded in 1966. And it was dominated by Japan. In terms of votes, we can see that both US and Japan have approximately 15% of the votes. The share of Japan is just a little bit larger than US, but US and Japan are usually on the same page. So there will not be a lot of difference in the way that they vote. They want to operate this. The way that they operate the Asian Development Bank is very similar to how they operate the World Bank. Other members, notably the largest members, are China, India and Australia, who all three of them hold a 6%, roughly 6% share of the votes.
Oh, this is a very different percentage in actual.
Yes, so it's not exactly 6%, it's a little bit more, a little bit less, but roughly 6%. So Japan has 15.56% and US has like 14.9% or something like that. It's all based on the committed capital. The capital is 14 billion, which is this is a significant amount. Paid up is 6 billion so far. And if we look at the presidents, we see Japan flags from the beginning to the end, which means that the president of the Asian Development Bank has always been Japanese, being an indication that the Asian Development Bank has been dominated by Japan. Okay, so we see the World Bank dominated by the United States, Asian Development Bank dominated by Japan. So the West, including Japan, has been dominating IMF, World Bank, Asian Development Bank. Now, one of the problems is, especially the IMF has had a rather poor track record in recent years. There's a lot of criticism on the IMF and their clear focus on only monetary solutions to any problem. They provide loans to countries, but the conditions for these loans are very strict, very stringent. That means that a lot of economies who are in a bad condition need to go through very far-reaching changes, and not every economy is ready for that. We see, and especially in recent times, we see, for example, Greece, whose economy has shrunken a lot in the past 5-6 years, partly as the result of these measures that were requested by the IMF and the European lenders. So. And there is a criticism from economists worldwide who say, okay, this is not how you should do it. And actually now even the IMF itself has acknowledged that maybe they have been a little bit too much focused on only monetary solutions. So they changed their stance too. They say, okay, it's not a one recipe fits all. I don't know if you remember the person who worked for the IMF in the video on Saturday. He also acknowledged that, okay, our program is a really good program. I think we did good work, but maybe it was applied in the wrong country. Okay, when he was referring to Indonesia, where Indonesia went through a development program or a reconstruction program, and it led to. He was a representative of one of the big banks, but he had worked for the IMF. I don't know if you remember that everybody in the forum, everybody in the panel came down on him very hard. Because of he tried to defend what the IMF had done in Indonesia, and none of the panel members believed that they did a very good job, except the IMF member himself. So the IMF has a poor track record. The West has been dominating development banks. And on the other side of the spectrum, we see that China's influence, China's economic influence, is becoming larger and larger. Actually, their share of voting rights, the 6% that they have in the Asian Development Bank, and the very limited voting rights that they have in the World Bank, does not represent their economic influence. China is a holder of the largest pool of reserves worldwide, and therefore they have started to claim a bigger role. For example, they have been asked to become part of the special drawing rights in the IMF, and they have asked for an increase in shares, in share of the votes, and this has been blocked by mainly the American Congress. They have been very slow in accepting the changing reality in the world economy. Even members of the IMF, even Western countries, have asked for the IMF to give for the IMF to change their stance and to give more influence to China and other developing countries. But so far it did not materialize, and this led to frustration. Okay, why don't we get more of our share? And this frustration also led to problems, because even though developing countries have strong economy, have a lot of reserves, they don't want to put it in the World Bank or in the IMF, because they don't have influence in those institutions. So they started to think about developing their own initiatives. The first initiative is the BRICS Bank. The BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa are the BRICS nations. They are rapidly developing nations worldwide. The BRICS Bank is a global bank. It has 5 members, and every member has the same number of shares. So we see that China, Brazil, South Africa, they all have the same numbers of shares, and there are 500,000 unallocated shares. The total number of shares is 1 million, and shareholding is also equally divided, 20%, 20%, 20%. This is maybe one of the good things about the BRICS Bank, but it also underlines its weakness, because everybody has the same saying, but China has an economy which is much larger than South Africa, and they need to follow the weakest link in this part.
What does the right-hand side mean? Contingent reserve arrangement. What does it mean?
I think that's I'm not 100% sure, but I think that actually this is what they are actually committing to the BRICS Bank. So they have the same number of shares, but not everybody is committing. Yes.
Contribution amount, right?
And South Africa doesn't have so much reserve, so.
Yeah, I see.
So this is also a problem. Like among these nations, like for example, the first president of the BRICS Bank was Indian, and the headquarters is in this nation, and everybody needed to have something to exert some kind of influence within this BRICS Bank. In itself, these developing countries with their large trade surpluses have a lot of foreign reserves, so they to organize themselves is also because they wanted to make a stronger bloc as lenders to actually developed nations like Western nations, but it's very difficult for them to go in the same direction, because they have so much their interests are so different. So they came up with the BRICS Bank, very diverse economies and also diverse economical systems, because China has a completely different system than South Africa and, for example, Brazil, who have mature democracies. One thing that I thought was pretty funny was that Russia invited Greece to join the BRICS Bank, to provide them with loans as an alternative to IMF and Western countries.
Do you know some voting rights? How organized is their voting?
So basically everybody has the same number of votes.
It means in the case of they want to develop a new investment.
Yes.
3 of those need to be agreed or
Exactly.
majority of.
Yes. Yeah. So you have a 3-2. You have with 3 you have a majority. So if South Africa, India, Russia are in favor, or Brazil are in favor, then they can outvote China and whoever. But it's very difficult for them to be effective because their economies are so different. Their political systems are very different. They have something in common, is that they are all upcoming nations.
I think so.
But other than that, it's very difficult to make a very strong policy and go in a single direction. So actually, this is a quite new bank, but from the shadow of this BRICS bank, the AIIB came up. It was signed in 2015, and the reason why the AIIB was founded, it is purely for development of infrastructure in Asia, in the Asian region. This was one of the reasons why it was founded. This is actually a number that was I don't know what if there was a lot of science behind it, but a number that was mentioned by people from the Asian Development Bank, that there was a funding gap in the Asian region for infrastructure projects of $8 trillion. So there is not enough money to finance all these infrastructure development in the region. Now, infrastructure development is very much in the interest of China. They have developed a Silk Road project where they want to connect Asia with Europe through waterways, through overland. So they want to integrate, bring Asia and Europe together. And they also want to develop the region because China is gradually changing towards a consumption-oriented economy. And that means that they will look at countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, etc. to become their new headquarters for manufacturing. So they are going through the same phase because actually the cost structure in China is rapidly changing. The wages are increasing. So they need good access, close connection with the countries around them. So infrastructure development is very important. Now you can see that these figures are 2010, 2020, so it's already kind of old information. But this was what actually started the AIIB. This idea. We need $8 trillion. So let's start a bank together. Now what they could have done in China is say, okay, well we just take the Chinese Development Bank and make it international. But if you want to be successful as a development bank, you need not only money, because China has enough money. They have $4 trillion US in foreign reserves, but they also need credibility. Credibility is very important. That's why they need to start a bank in combination with other nations. They started the idea of the Asian Development Bank and made it an open initiative. So everybody was welcome. The uptake, so the number of countries that actually joined already within a 2-year period is very impressive. 57 countries. The capital, 50 billion US dollars. So far only the actual money put in is $10 billion. Notable members, important members, of course China, Russia and India, also members of the BRICS Bank, England, Germany, France, Italy, and not the US, not Japan. So, and what's also very interesting is that the IMF and the World Bank have already announced that they're going to work together with the AIIB. So these members are interesting. Why, for example, Russia and India are also members of the BRICS Bank, and there is of course some kind of a conflict. They started this initiative together. Now the BRICS Bank doesn't only focus on infrastructure development, they also have other projects. It's not only Asia, but basically what can be expected is that China will be more focused on the AIIB because they have a much stronger role within the AIIB compared to the role that they have within the BRICS Bank. So basically their strongest member has started their own initiative. However, Russia and India thought it was was important enough that they would join. England was a slap in the face of the United States. The United States has directly asked England not to join the AIIB because basically the United States didn't want Western nations to participate in this. But England thought this was a golden opportunity because with their membership, England gets to become a clearinghouse in London for renminbi because they provide the vice president to the AIIB. And England so far only has about 1.5% of that trade with China. Very little, very small share. So for them, this was a great opportunity to basically get closer connections within Asia and within China more specifically. So for England, this was a great business opportunity to become a member of the AIIB. Good enough to basically say to the United States, well, you know what, we're going to join anyway. And that was Obama was very upset about this, openly upset about this.
Of course, recently we need to consider England very strong relationship with China, especially for nuclear partner, and also clearinghouse, renminbi clearinghouse in London.
But it's all very recent. It's all very recent because they didn't have any close ties, and this membership accelerated everything.
Europe is still slugging economy, so they need to consider the rise of China's economy. Not only England, but Germany and French, and also the same intention to involve in Chinese economy's growth. And this is the reason, even though currently Obama tried to put the sanctions for Ukraine to get support from European countries, but this is also stupid, for the request to European people. But they are actually all countries are heavily involved in Russia. So this is almost difficult. Recently, Obama's foreign diplomacy a little bit, is too much force to Western people, and especially for AIIB cases. I think America is a little bit lagging.
Well, the problem is that basically they don't. If the United States would still have the economic power, they still have the weight to actually persuade other countries to be on their side, to remain part of their team, to keep the relations open. Then it would have been easy. But the new economic reality is that already in purchasing power parity terms, China has the largest economy, and they soon will have the largest economy in nominal terms as well. So against that backdrop, nobody can ignore China any longer. Maybe Japan can ignore China, or maybe they can't. That's the question. Because they do not only have economic interest, they also have a security interest to stay on the United States side. But this is not the case for European countries. China is very far away from Europe. So basically, for the UK, for England, there are only opportunities. There are very little costs other than the relationship with the United States. If you put these two on a scale, it's very simple that UK chooses to actually follow this initiative and not listen to the United States any longer.
Yeah, actually, China wants to have leadership for investment in the Asia Pacific countries, especially for infrastructure, but also the Chinese, they are not so much arrogant to leading all those infrastructure investment. So they are seriously considered to give the opportunity to European people for leading those infrastructure investment. So England knows that, and also England is recently, past several years, very close to China. And Russia and India is different. Russia is Putin is now switching from Europe to Asia, like a Siberia investment. So that he tried to involve in. Okay, we are a member of Asian countries. India is they officially announced they need the next 5 years. They need 1 trillion investment in infrastructure. Modi said, and he is a very strong politician. And he is not sticking to China, but also consider for balance in Asia Pacific countries. But if he got money from Aiib, okay, willing to get money. So India is taking balance for those among Asian countries.
Yes.
So also he needs money from China. So every country they have own intention, different intention to involve in AIIB.
Yeah.
So
Actually, the whole idea for AIIB was born in India, as we saw last Saturday. The idea came in India, but it was finally, it was in India. They didn't, well, according to the commentators, they didn't. The politicians again were late in making decisions, and therefore China took the idea and made it theirs. Yeah. So again, much to the dismay of a lot of people involved in India, who see that actually after China, India is the next like major power to take into consideration. But India again was late in taking this idea and bringing it to the forefront. And now they have become a member, a little bit reluctantly, because they don't have the leading role. And exactly when they still had a lot of influence, the BRICS Bank, that's where they put their money. They see that that China again is taking the lead, and they kind of lose their importance within the BRICS Bank.
Yeah, well, America did not join this AIIB institution. Because America is recently, I recognize this country is very local, country, especially Congress is not open to be globalized. So they are seeking to still monopolize global, governance instead of China emerging, and so Iran is the same. Iran is another emerging Middle East, and Congress does not recognize this kind of global change. So this is the kind of situation. Even if Obama is also very poor for foreign affairs, but still Congress much more does not recognize current global situation. So they are currently behind the global change. So this is currently now is at least Asia Pacific is a single polar system in the world, two polar at least in Asia Pacific. So they should recognize America cannot lead global economy.
Well, this is what the United States has been doing since, well, actually, I can say basically since World War II,
Yeah,
but they have become like a regional hegemon, and very much like in the Americas, basically there is no equal to the United States, and they have been trying to kind of control other regional powers, like for example, first Soviet Union. They won that battle, and now they're trying to contain China's role in the region. So basically, because United States, we take this for granted.
Yeah,
but basically, they are pushing directly against the borders of China with their troops in Okinawa and their involvement in Korea. This is normal, but if you look at it from the perspective of China, basically they are directly very far away from their home territory, pushing against the borders of China. So is that normal?
Yeah, the same as military. Okay, America still believe the global police to dominate even in Middle East, but completely failed. They lot of money invested to Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, every country that recent nuclear Iran deal still Congress against them. But this is stupid. This is America cannot govern all over the world. So they need to recognize that this is money the same.
But they have been rather successful in maintaining their dominant role for the past 60 years through these investments, by divide and rule, basically, in the case of the Middle East.
Yeah, so they expert people recognize now America's foreign strategy need to be changed. Instead of global governance, but not the governance, but just for example China, economically they need a good relationship with China, but military is different.
It's different. Right? It's different, but I think so. Economies, and that's very often the business needs to go on. Everybody realizes in the world, everybody wants business to go on as usual. So you good economic ties do not automatically imply good security ties or good military safety. Those things can be almost opposite. The US has announced their pivot strategy, but at the same time they're trying to negotiate with China to get more trade liberalizations through TPP. Well, and the next step is obviously that they want to negotiate something with China. So those things can actually go hand in hand. But I think what is really important here is that the world is kind of telling the United States now economically that it's not natural anymore, it's not of this day and age anymore, that you are the single global hegemon. That role has ended. Basically you have to return and go back to your real position and come to terms with that. Not only economically, I think that's also gradually starting to evolve from a security point of view.
Security, I think, the next couple of decades, still America will lead a global level rather than China.
Oh yeah, they have much more power. But the question is whether that is a widely held belief only in the United States, or also with their partners, because part of the strength of the United States also lies in their network of allies, and their allies.
America needs to change security strategies at the global level. Right? I agree with you.
So the US loses face, I don't think only in economic terms, but in general in terms of the power of the US is no longer the single power in the world. Power is shifting towards Asia, and so that is one very important message that we get from the quick uptake of the AIIB. Another thing that is very important to note is China's record with governance. This is the reason why, the official reason why Japan and the United States have not joined AIIB. And AIIB, as you mentioned in your opening comments, it's all still very much a greenfield operation. Everything looks very good on paper. We're open for any change, and we will be open to whatever, because basically they have not really put things down. It is not yet set in stone how the AIIB will operate. It's not even known, for example, in which currency they're going to provide these loans, whether that will be renminbi or dollars or a currency basket. A lot of these things are still unknown, and Japan has been very careful and say, okay, well, based on China's track record with governance, and this was acknowledged in the video from Saturday, where, for example, Indonesia, the representative from Indonesia, the former Minister of Economic Affairs, says, "Oh, we all have our experiences with taking loans from China and the Chinese Development Bank," and it was implied that those experiences had not always been good. So the conditions that China put on their loans have not always been in the best interest of the recipient countries. So
I understand this is high interest rate.
No, not only high interest rate, but for example, the safety conditions, negative for environmental issues,
or some conditions?
Yeah. So a lot of the conditions that Indonesia needed to comply with in order to get these loans. Basically, it was a very good arrangement for China as well, more than they actually that Indonesia was happy with. But okay, they needed the money, so therefore they agreed to it. But basically, I felt that they have been taken advantage of.
Like a Japanese type of ODA. Is very strong tied in Japanese government or something?
Yes.
Yes, China is requesting same condition.
That's
Okay.
yes, and they have been providing loans to countries, for example, where human rights situations, etc., were not very good. On the other hand, China saying, well, are you kidding us? For example, governance. If you provide loans to Mobutu and Marcos and all those kinds of regimes, are you telling us that we are not compliant with good governance? Also, take a very close look at yourself before you make such accusations. But governance, yes, a lot of things are unknown. I will not go into details because we do not have enough time regarding governance. But this is a concern, and it is a concern because a lot of things are unknown, and Japan has decided to take a more distant role. Behind that decision is probably also the fact that Japan now has a dominant role within the Asian Development Bank. And the AIIB is, even though the Asian Development Bank has a much wider spectrum of activities, is more of a World Bank type of organization with many more industry experts and what have you. So Japan decided officially, because of these governance concerns, not to join, and same for the United States. Other countries say, okay, if we want to, if we are concerned about governance, then it's better to become a member and to change the system from within. That is a decision that you can make. So countries like England also. And this is what the United States is saying, like, okay, England and France and Germany, they all decided to join, but they didn't really commit to anything. They basically just signed up and were present at the founding ceremony, but they didn't put in a lot of money yet, and they did not commit to anything. Another angle is the position of other institutions like the IMF, the Asian Development Bank, and the BRICS Bank could lead to polarizations. Even though this is only about infrastructure, I mean, the money can go only. Money can be taken only once. Basically, it's also about which initiative is more attractive. But they are all going for private money. They put the money in the fund, and eventually they go into the private markets to get money by issuing obligations.
China has a strong commitment or confidence for their 4 trillion reserves.
Yes.
And also they have lots of money to control Asia Pacific countries. So even if IMF, ADB, and the other World Bank, they do not think for those banks and institutions not enemy anymore. So China has very strong confidence to governance monetary level in Asia Pacific. And not more than that, how come they started AIIB, but also the NDB, BRICS Bank, but also the Shanghai Bank? And why 3 banks are going to start? Because they need some camouflage. AIB is a very strong, powerful organization. So they try to start the other couple banks to camouflage for the AIB's power to strength to Asia Pacific. This is my opinion.
But China,
I don't think anything about the IMF, ADB. ADB, this is actually neglectable, they believe.
The Asian Development Bank, if you look at the paid-in capital and their wide range of activities.
They know ADB, the president, was talking about in the past. They know very well because deputy president, vice president came from China. So they speak out many things about ADB, nothing powerful. It means the decision-making process, and they know how to lend money, they know how to organize the organization ADB. The good the aspect is the Aiib to take got from ADB, but they know what the pitfall of ADB very well.
So the experience that the ADB has could be very useful to the AIIB.
IMF will not function in Asia Pacific. They know that. And World Bank also what? So China is very strong company with AIB.
Yeah.
But AIB is so powerful. So that's the reason they started another couple banks, Big Bank and Shanghai Bank. And so this is sort of, okay, we have 3 banks, how come we so much, focus on
Well, there's enough place for all these banks. If you look at the money that is needed for infrastructure investment, like $8 trillion US dollars is a lot of money. That could never be raised, for example, through IMF or World Bank, because those developing nations do not want to put in the money because they're underrepresented there. Basically, there is enough room and space for multiple banks to coexist together.